Let's now bring in Mark Obar, an ICT specialist and an editor with the Standard Digital. Thank you for joining us, Mark.
Thank you.
This Transform Africa, how important is this summit?
Now, this summit is quite important because it discusses some of the issues that have been actually anchored within the Sustainable Development Goals, which is basically primarily categorized into three: poverty reduction, reduction of inequalities in the world, and ensuring that it tackles climate change. But broadly, when you talk about smart cities as their theme goes, it's anchored in ensuring that poverty reduces dramatically or strategically by employing some of the most sustainable activities within Africa to ensure that generally the country moves or the continent moves in a very good platform.
All right.
Yeah.
Does it target only the capitals, or will this encompass other cities in Kenya and other towns?
Generally, smart cities, the theme is about smart cities, but generally what they aim to achieve is to ensure that there are certain technological developments that are anchored within these countries, not just within the major capitals, but down there. Because when you talk about technology intensity, then in Africa, they have to do a lot because today just 1.1% of the entire continent's GDP comes from the technology world. So they have to ensure that they invest in the various populations across the world. It's a strategic investment in the population to ensure that a number of people use technology for economic gains.
This is happening in Kigali, Rwanda. Rwanda have been very strong on this. But when you look at our very own capital city of Nairobi, how are we doing, in your own opinion?
We're doing far much better than Rwanda if you look at the statistics in terms of contribution, technology or ICT contribution to national GDP, which Kenya has got over 10% contribution to the national GDP, while other countries like Senegal are also doing quite much better than other African countries. But there is need for a lot more of investment in the infrastructure because we have a huge population that lives or operates within the informal sector. Now, technology must come in to play a key role in converting the informal sector into a formal economy that will help the country to move from just from the 10% contribution to a higher magnitude. But as far as Africa is concerned, it's projected by around 2025. The entire continent will be having a contribution of around $300 billion from the ICT development. And that is why a number of countries are coming in to ensure that they do a lot when it comes to investment in the population and generally in the various smart cities for intelligent growth of the nation.
All right. We talk a lot about investment into this by the national government. What is the role of private sector?
Private sector is very much important because, first of all, the government is not able to meet all the measures that are required, especially for such a huge investment. It means that the private sector must play their role. For example, in Kenya, we don't have major laboratories for the technological development, but the private sector may come in, both locally and internationally, may come in to establish some of those infrastructures that are needed to ensure that people get the knowledge. Today, over 90% of the technology that we use in Africa is imported. For us to have our own homegrown technology in Africa, it means that we must invest in a lot of research, a lot of development of laboratories, a lot of development of personal human resource capacity that is capable of meeting such needs. And to do that, it means that the private sector must come in and play a key role by putting resources like capital, by putting resources like research experts, and trying to experiment and see the outcome and the reaction in various perspectives.
What was seen as one of the major projects of the Kenya Vision 2030, that is the Konza City, Techno City, is yet to kick off. When you talk to lay Kenyans, they don't think it will ever, begin. What do you say to that?
That is why private sector is very much important. What the government did was a good intention generally for the launch and all that. But this requires billions and billions of money that must be pumped into that project for it to take off. It's still lagging behind because, one, there are no enough resources towards that kind of investment. But it's a good idea that if many people come out to join hands, it would really take off quite well. But again, the projection which was there, we would have such a huge Silicon Valley within a short period of time,
Right.
around less than 20 years. That was quite ambitious, but it can be done, especially if the country reduces certain vices, like amount of corruption, amount of
Wage bill and
wage bill and all that.
All right.
It can be done.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you so
Mark
much.
Obar, ICT expert and also an editor here at Standard Digital. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Sharing your perspectives. Let's stay with that and let's listen into that third Transform Africa Summit currently ongoing at the Kigali Convention Center. Let's listen into it.
Juni, ndetse Nicola Bahanga, Nisaka Zabumeni. Do you understand? Wakati ujiao wa Afrika ni mzuri. Kufuatia mwelekeo wenu pamoja na ICT. Africa's future is right when we depend on...
Right, the future is Rwanda, not even talent, right?
Sorry, finish.
Please, your last remarks and the issue on the private sector.
Okay. All right. So somebody asked me once, what makes you get up in the morning? What makes you do what you do? So I told the person, I have the fear of the recolonization of Africa through IT. Because that is one area where we can compete. Like I said, it reduces time and space, and you don't need that much resource to compete. I urge every government in Africa to make it the #1 priority to focus on IT. That's the sure way where we can compete and hopefully, change the digital revolution of Africa.
Perfect, very precise. Bruce, your final words.
I visited a friend in Nigeria, and she told me that she brought home some books that were written by Nigerians, some children's stories, and read them to her child, and her child said, I just love that story. And she said, why? She said, because their names sound like my names. Going back to this issue of African curriculum, African students need role models. They need to understand that Africans can do things, and they're doing these things. So independent of what the content of the curriculum is, getting in front of our students what Africans are doing is going to be just like how do you get women into engineering? You get women role models. I'd like to see that happen. And let me just end by saying capacity building for a dead end where there's no jobs is pretty discouraging. And somebody brought up this issue of why are there not Africans doing some of these jobs. During the time here, I've thought about that. The big money goes to people that roll in to do projects. Well, if I've got a project, it has to be done in a year, I'm not going to hire entry-level people. I can't. So I'd like to see African governments think very hard about how do they start making companies invest not in just doing projects, but in the long haul, establishing long-term indigenous operations where now they can start really employing these bright students that are coming out of school. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Now,
A third Transform Africa Summit currently ongoing at the Kigali Convention Center in the Rwandese capital of Kigali. Now we